we must ask a question. What's really going on with our twin island, Trinidad and Tobago? Small population, most southern islands on the Caribbean chain, and an island that boasts, at least from our standpoint, some amazing personalities. We have made a major mark, major footprint on the world stage. But when we look at what's happening on the ground, for those of us who live here, who go to school here, who put our anchor down, we have to ask that question as to what's happening. We look at the front page, we look at what's happening, especially this week, and it leaves so much questions to be answered. And let's do that deep dive, and we welcome Johanse this morning, Johanse IODK, a behavioral change specialist, to walk us through it, because, Johanse, first and foremost, good morning, welcome.
Good morning. Thank you. Thank you for having me, Jace.
Yes, that's right. There are many who, still believe, I believe, we live in a beautiful place. It's a blessed twin island state.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
But there's an element of evil, an underbelly of crime and violence that is, at least when it surfaces and it comes to the forefront, it leaves you heartbroken, and it makes you wonder, why are I still here? What's happening with the country? Are we a violent society, Johanse?
I wouldn't necessarily say that we are a violent society. I would come from the standpoint, first, violence may be the symptoms, but let's go back to even the root of it. He even used a word just now there. He said there's evil. Evil in itself, and I'm not necessarily targeting, but evil in itself could be a judgment, because there's always reasons why people behave the way they do. And I'm not condoning any form of behavior that we've seen thus far in the news, but understanding why is important, because if we have a headache, yes, we know the headache exists, and we continue taking Advil or Tylenol, the headache may go away. But if we don't understand the root cause of the headache, it will continue happening. And even though we put a plaster on the sore, then it will continue recurring. So if we look at our society in that way, we are all brothers and sisters in this lovely twin island of Trinidad and Tobago. And each one of us make up the body. So if you think about it like a human body, all of us have a specific function in terms of carrying the nation forward. But there are times where your hand may be hurting, your liver may need detoxing, your kidneys may be cleaning. So being able to identify when those things are occurring, especially in society, would greatly assist.
What makes me heartbroken and makes me worry is the fact that conflict resolution seems to be a far-fetched concept at this point in time. Listen, it's not yesterday people falling out. Our grandparents, great-grandparents would have had, I would imagine, issues with their neighbors. Even if things got to blows back in the day, it was just that, blows, and then we move on. But we reached a point now, we have come to a place where, if I'm upset with you, Johanse, the way to resolve that is to ensure that you end up in Belgrove's, Guide's funeral home, Allen's, the list goes on. People literally, if they're upset with someone or if someone does them injustice or they believe that they've been wrong, the answer now is to eliminate that person. I don't understand where that particular mindset, that spirit is coming from.
It may take a little more research to understand the genesis of it, but let's go with the definition of the word violence. Violence means the intent to hurt. So intent to hurt or cause harm. So I think that mentality shift, and to be honest, I'm not sure when, because me as a little boy growing up, the mentality at that time wasn't the intent to hurt. It may be, and this is not condoned, it may be the intent to shame, to make you feel bad, but not necessarily to hurt you or eliminate you. So somewhere along the lines, things change. And what's coming to be now is very possible that as technology and as we modernize and we in a world where we want everything in an instant, right? Now when there's a problem, we want it eliminated instantly, not knowing, just like with a solution, there's steps to getting a solution. We also now, and before, when I was growing up, there's steps to resolving an issue, but it is, we go to blows, we argue about it, we quarrel about it, we curse about it, but there was a step on a process. Now, because we want things now, even the conflict aspect of it, we want the conflict resolved immediately. We don't want to go through any steps, any processes. So sometimes in the effort to eliminate it immediately, it may come across as violence or killing.
You answer, you think pop culture plays a part? Because even when you look at the relationship between the public and, let's say, police, yes, the officers say, if you see something, say something. There are hotlines to call to give information, but there's a major part of the population that believes, hey, me ain't gonna call nobody, I is no informer, I know no snitch. So I wonder sometimes if pop culture, based on the popular movies of the day, the music of the day, shapes our movement, our position, our narrative on the ground here in Trinidad and Tobago.
Yes, it definitely has. And many times pop culture originates from society that is not ours. So there may not be anything reflective. And I'll give an example. Let's say an African-American culture. Yes, it exists there, but it may not be relevant exactly to our society. But because that's what we see a lot, that's what we hear a lot, we may now adapt our mentality to a situation that may not apply. One way we could start combating this is actually having programs, social media posts, testimonies of more real life and relevant things to this society, because I was thinking about it, and if I'm being empirical and not being emotional, I've had more positive interactions with the police than negative. But if I also go from an emotional standpoint, I may think, well, and listen to a narrative. Now, I'm not saying there's some people who may not have had more negative responses, but even thinking about it from a non-emotional standpoint on what we could do instead of just going with the narrative of the season or the week or the moment, really facing the reality of the truth of our society, not necessarily what is imported from somewhere else.
Yeah, because the reality is, when we consider the TTPS and the relationship between the TTPS and the public, I've always said it's not like back in the day when my grandfather came from Barbados in the probably 50s or whatever it was. He came to be a police when we were taking officers from other parts of the region. Most of the officers now in this current 2022 come from the community. They are Trinbagonians, just like myself, just like you, Johansi. And I sometimes wonder, you know, where's the breakdown? Where's the breakdown? Of course, you're hearing reports of people going to the officers saying, listen, I'm being threatened, and they're suggesting that they don't really take these threats or they do the due diligence to put forward the warning. I sometimes wonder what's the relationship like, really and truly, on the ground with the public and the TTPS. What's been your research and your observations thus far?
Relationship, that word you use there is real important, because all relationships need work, need effort. And let's look at it like, even in a marriage, if there's a breakdown of trust in a marriage relationship or any relationship, both parties need to do more than before to regain the trust. So right now, if there's a sentiment that the public don't trust the police, if that's the sentiment, and if the police are unable to bridge the gap with the public, so there's a breakdown of trust, a breakdown of the relationship, both parties, because it's our country of Trinidad and Tobago, and it's not one party's responsibility to rebuild the trust. Because if trust is broken in a relationship and one person say, well, as you break the trust and you have to do all the work, then the problem still may not be solved. So it takes relationship on an effort on both parties, and being on the ground, as you say, is very important. Because I remember in my community, there was a time when there was a constant police patrol, and some of the officers actually would come out and just speak to people, and they became more than just officers patrolling. It became officer, I'll just give an example, John, Officer Jean, etc. So now there was more of a relationship. So when something occurs, I wouldn't feel like I'm going to the police, I'm going to an officer that I know. If an officer comes in, I know the officer can say, I know Johannes, I know Jane, I know Michael. So it helps bridge the gap between that disconnect.
Interesting. Yeah, the relationship there between the TTPS and I would imagine the public. I sometimes wonder, because let's be real, when the police they engage you, when they come forward to talk to you, I mean, there's an immediate defensive wall people put up, and sometimes the communication, the rapport, I guess some people would suggest the way the officers come at them, obviously the way some people will respond to the officers, things tend to escalate, and we see via social media with people taping the officers doing their work, you know, these situations go from 0 to 100. It's really some interesting times, and I wonder, where do we go from here? How do we really, other than what you would have recommended there in terms of having that relationship and working on the relationship, how do we bring about behavioral change in Trinidad and Tobago?
One of the ways, remember that everyone is human, all right? And that even though we may have a title, it could be policeman, it could be fire officer, it could be mother, father, that title sometimes we dehumanize or pedestalize someone and say that they are above human. So they would say something like, well, I never expect my mother to do this, or I never expect a police officer to do this. Now, I'm not condoning any negative behavior, but remember that everyone's human. So even as police officers need support. And if the police officers, even of themselves, know, you know what, having a rough day, having a rough week, things going on at home, because they have a life also, that they seek the necessary support. And when even interacting with each other, so it may not be, we may say it's not our responsibility to think about whether a police officer having a rough day. But let's say it may not be a police officer's responsibility to think of you having a rough day, or some stigma that you have. But if both parties, just like in any relationship, we decide we want to come from a place of love, a place of we want the country to be better. Everyone may not be perfect, everyone may not practice it, but it's we live in here. And the only way for us to move forward is for us to make the effort. So you may be having a hard day, I may be having a hard day, but what can we do to make this situation better? And of course, make the country on a holistic manner be better.
Yeah. You answer before we wrap things up. Must touch on the school children and the violence we're seeing, you know, behind the walls. It's nothing new. You would have seen it in your time in school. I definitely would have seen it. We didn't have cell phones to capture it though. But this rounds here, it's a bit intense. We're seeing even the girls getting in a major way and fighting. Some are suggesting, like the priest who gave the mass in Saparia over the weekend, he said to work with these children. It's not to expel them, it's to really try to get to the deeper root cause of the violence. And then there are those that are suggesting, hey, take them before the courts charge. Let them understand the seriousness of their violation. What's your take on the school violence?
I agree that we should work with them because, again, understanding why we could actually help in a specific and tailored manner versus just taking them to the court, expelling them. And also you said something before, you said fighting is nothing new. I agree, but the reasoning at this time may be different because we've never experienced, I give an example, being in a lockdown on COVID. And so we have no data, we have no even experience to understand how exactly these children were affected by being locked down for so long in terms of their energy, in terms of their social interaction, their social competence. So the asking why is very important at this time.
Yeah, interesting. Any closing remarks, Johan? Say, go right ahead.
I would say that Trinidad and Tobago, we could do this, you know, with effort, just like any relationship. If everyone even takes 1% better, just progressive each day, because when we go to the gym, we spend 8 hours, we wouldn't be fit, but small effort every day. So each one of us, it don't have to be big efforts every day. We could do one thing each day to improve the country, because we live here and our children live here, and we could make the foundation brick by brick for the society that we want. It's not too late for any relationship. With effort, a relationship could be repaired, therefore our country could be repaired.
Yeah, well said. A sense of optimism. Because, listener, you answered, the reality is there's lots of love still in this country. I feel it, I see it, I experience it every day. But the underbelly of violence and the crime and those who are clearly broken, they really, really, really take it to a whole different level, and they embarrass the country. They embarrass us who live here and those who live outside the diaspora. I mean, I'm sure you know, they don't want to come back. They're nervous. They always tell you, nah, boy, Trinidad, I'm afraid to come back home. And we have to tell them, no, it's not like that. But the stuff we saw this week, make you say I can understand why people don't want to come home. It's really embarrassing, you answer. It's out of control, and our country too small for some of what we see.
Jason, even though something is broken, it could always be fixed. Even though it still have the cracks, I'm not saying the damage may not be there, but it can be fixed. It may take a little more effort, and that's what I'm saying. Effort. Yes, we understand how life was before, but the reality is it is this way now. And if all of us put even a little more effort, 1% effort, we could do this.
Well said. We'll touch base again, you answer. I love the perspective. All the best to you, man. Have a great weekend.
Yeah, you will have a good day.
Yeah, for sure. You're most welcome. We come back, as mentioned, the Go Green initiative. The details is coming up after the break. We have with us members, at least, well, the head coach and a player from the Premier Sports Club to give us some details. Stay tuned.